What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with This is the Big Show. Michael Chandler talks about the UFC. When Michael Chandler made his electrifying UFC debut in 2021 by knocking out Dan Hooker, the former Bellator MMA lightweight champion proved that he belonged on the big stage. It's something Chandler has prided himself on since joining the promotion, being the company man and going out of his way to promote the UFC, despite admitting that he really doesn't make much more money from the UFC as opposed to Bellator.
I make more money. I don't necessarily make more money on paper or in my fights, but what I've been able to do, once again, going back to the reputation, I may have been a smaller name. I may have been a guy who was overlooked. I may have been a guy who said, well, he's not that legitimate because he fights in Bellator. But one thing I always did was I kept a really good reputation.
Although the comments drew considerable criticism for the UFC, Iron Mike has never wavered in his steadfast backing of the company. After seeing Nate Diaz's post-fight Octagon interview after defeating Tony Ferguson at UFC 279, Chandler doubled down on his belief that the UFC is in fact the grandest stage in combat sports. He spoke on a recent episode of the MMA Hour, saying,
even with all the middle fingers to the man and the water bottles thrown, he still said, I'm gonna come right back here to the UFC. Now, why would Nate, number one, say that? Or why would he want to do that? You know, even if there's a little bit of tension right now. So it just goes to show this is the place to be. This is the big show.
Chandler's time in the UFC has been an up and down one. After making his debut by defeating Dan Hooker, Chandler narrowly lost to Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight belt at UFC 262 before then dropping a unanimous decision to Justin Gaethje to cap off a busy freshman year in the UFC. Chandler, who of course returned to the win column earlier this year with a brutal knockout over Tony Ferguson, is now set to fight Dustin Poirier at UFC 281 in a fight that he believes to be for the #1 contender spot. Standing across from him in the octagon will be Dustin Poirier, a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter set on earning one more crack at the lightweight belt. When the two clash, who do you think leaves New York with the win? Give us your predictions down below. Khabib believes Charles Oliveira won't make it to UFC 280 main event clash. In October, top-ranked lightweights Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev will square off in a highly anticipated clash for the UFC lightweight title. The bout is expected to headline a stacked night of fights that will also see Aljamain Sterling and TJ Dillashaw fight for the Bantamweight Championship. Ahead of the fight, both Team Makhachev and Team Oliveira have thrown passive-aggressive jabs at one another. Despite that, Khabib recently took to Twitter to reveal that he doesn't believe Oliveira will even show up for the fight. According to Khabib, backup fighter Beneil Dariush, who is set to fight Mateusz Gamrot on the card, will be tagged in when Oliveira inevitably drops out of the bout. The comments have drawn considerable criticism and have led many to question if the controversial Dominance MMA manager Ali Abdelaziz is responsible for the latest tweet. It's no secret that Abdelaziz uses his fighters' Twitter accounts. Fighters, including Kamaru Usman, have admitted that they've been forced to reclaim their Twitter accounts after catching heat for their comments Abdelaziz made on their profiles. The move is likely to rekindle the beef between the two camps, reviving it just in time for the final build-up between the pivotal lightweight showdown on October 22nd. When the pair meet in the octagon, both will do so in the midst of stellar win streaks. As fight fans know, Oliveira will be looking to reclaim the lightweight title that he lost to the Arizona Athletic Commission, while Makhachev is looking to become the next era of Team Khabib fighters to capture UFC gold. When the two meet in the octagon come October, who do you think leaves Abu Dhabi champion? Next up, Daniel Cormier weighs in on alleged fake glove touch by Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 279. When Khamzat Chimaev and Kevin Holland stepped into the octagon in the main event of UFC 279, the fight was not competitive. After immediately shooting for a takedown, Chimaev grabbed a hold of a choke that Holland initially fought off. Following a brief scramble, the streaking Chechen prospect locked in a submission and secured himself the win. While the win initially looked about as clean as you can get inside the octagon, upon further review, some fans believe they noticed Chimaev getting the takedown only after baiting Holland into a fake glove touch. In the wake of the fight, UFC Hall of Famer Daniel Cormier couldn't help but address the situation, explaining that while he doesn't believe that Chimaev pulled the old fake glove touch, even if he had, there is no rule against it.
Now, do I think Khamzat tried to do a fake glove touch? No. I think that he feinted a punch. Hands go up, you shoot on your opponent. But I don't think he faked a glove touch. even if he did, there is no law that says that you have to touch gloves. This is a fight. This is war.
While Holland hasn't complained about fake glove touching in the bout, fans couldn't help but draw attention to the fact that they believe Chimaev grabbed his shorts while securing the takedown. Cormier, of course, is no stranger to controversy himself. The UFC Hall of Famer most notably made headlines when he used the towel at weigh-ins to help him make weight in an incident he denied until the day he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. On the heels of the scrap, Holland has revealed that he would like a more favorable matchup in his next bout, indicating that he'd prefer a striker like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Stay tuned for more updates about what's next for both men following UFC 279, and before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Next up, Alexander Volkanovski and Dan Hooker slam Colby Covington. It's no secret that Colby Covington is one of the most polarizing fighters on the UFC roster. The former interim welterweight champion has continued to garner a considerable amount of controversy throughout the course of the second half of his UFC career. To hear Covington tell it, he adopted the brash, controversial persona out of necessity to try and stave off being cut by the UFC. Whether or not that's actually true, Covington has continued to make headlines for everything from mocking Kamaru Usman's dead coach to poking fun at UFC Hall of Famer Matt Hughes for the tragic accident that saw him hit by a train. Given that, it's not entirely surprising that many UFC fighters don't like Covington. Recently, during a recent episode of their podcast, Alexander Volkanovski and Dan Hooker spoke about how Covington's personality has spilled over into his personal life, forcing the UFC to take drastic actions to keep him separate from other fighters.
He can't even train at like the PI. So they chuck him across the road. There's like two ones. The Apex is like in Vegas, PI is on one side of the road and everyone like trains there. And then the Apex is on the other side of the road. Like he comes in at night and the Apex like goes in the back door to the Apex. Like he's a little rat, bro. Like that's yeah. He doesn't stay at like the host hotel. Like he actually goes out of his way to just avoid people. Yeah. Like it's the weirdest thing.
Volkanovski continued, explaining that if you're going to adopt the Chael Sonnen-esque bad guy persona, you have to accept the consequences.
You're gonna play that, own it, right?
You have to, like, you have
own
to.
it and like,
a lot of guys
don't cry about it because I've heard him cry about, oh, I got to do this, I got to get security guards and all that. I was like, oh, don't play that game then. Like, what do you want us to do?
Yeah.
While Covington is certainly a controversial personality, his draw power is undeniable. Whether fans are tuning in to see him win or lose, the fact of the matter is that they're tuning in. As long as they are, Covington doesn't seem to care about the rest. And now for our breaking news story of the day, we have Nate Diaz leaking footage of the backstage altercation that ended up canceling the press conference for UFC 279.
You guys want to have a seat? Yeah, you will. Yeah. Going off. Going off. Send him back. Keep on, mark down. Yeah, give me your time, calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Your team. USA, motherfucker. Suck his dick.
What do you think of this altercation? Was it worthy of canceling the press conference, or has the UFC gone too soft? Also, we have Francis Ngannou with an update on his contract. He states, "My contract status right now is the same. I haven't received any offer, so it stayed the same. I hope like in the next 3 months, 2 to 3 months, we get to deal with that." He's also gone to say how the UFC is becoming stronger and the fighters have no power. Do you agree with Francis? Should the UFC allow fighters to get their own sponsors? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Last up, George St-Pierre reacts to Khamzat Chimaev missing weight. UFC Hall of Famer George St-Pierre is still widely to be one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time. In addition to his prowess inside the octagon, GSP's extensive experience in numerous martial arts disciplines gives the former champ a unique perspective on fights. On the heels of Khamzat Chimaev coming in nearly 10 pounds overweight for his UFC 279 scrap with Nate Diaz, St-Pierre believes that it will be hard for the 3-time Swedish national wrestling champion to earn his way back into the good graces of MMA fans. He spoke during a recent interview with the Schmo, saying that Chimaev needs to make weight. plain and simple.
I mean, when you miss weight, it's a big disrespect not only to your opponent but to the sport. But we don't know what happened. You know, maybe there's a reason, maybe there's a medical reason or something. You know, so when you don't know, you don't know. But for sure, in the future, if he misses weight another time, maybe that will prevent him from having a title shot. You know.
While St-Pierre believes that Chimaev deserves another shot to prove himself at welterweight, he believes the move would be the last chance for the streaking prospect to make the 170-pound welterweight limit. St-Pierre's comments aren't too far off from what Chimaev's teammate Darren Till recently stated following the fight.
I seen what Khamzat did to make the weight. He tried his utmost. I don't want to go into detail about it, but I know what he did. And the right decision was to stop cutting, because sometimes, and every fighter will know this, his body just shut down. His body stopped responding at a certain point. Now, okay, it was at a bad point where he was like 7-8 pounds over. I don't remember. But what can you do?
With Chimaev's immediate future being at middleweight, do you think we will see him compete at welterweight again? Or has the ship sailed for the streaking prospect at 170 pounds? Give us your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest news from the MMA zone. See you next time.